Welcome to Navigating Complexity, where we dive into life and business. Today we have Paolo Boero, whose journey weaves through family sacrifices, immigrant resilience, and self-discovery. We'll explore how his past shaped his present and hear lessons about him navigating startups, venture capital, and beyond.
Paolo, thanks for being on our show. Navigating Complexity is really about life. Complex things happen all around, and we've got to navigate through this. And you've got an interesting story we want to share with the audience to see how some of these things kind of intersect for maybe people in the audience, so they can also kind of see themselves in each other's stories. So it's all about community. Why don't we talk about your journey? I think it's fascinating, especially growing up. Let's talk about your parents and how that impacted you.
My dad's from Argentina. My mom met my dad in Argentina when she was 15. Mm-hmm. She was an exchange student there, and they lived there a long time. You know, I think I probably would be Argentinian if not for the Falkland Islands War and hyperinflation. In the 70s, there was a military regime and it was a mandatory draft. When the Falkland Islands War happened, after he had served his time, he was worried he was going to get redrafted. Uh-huh. My mom was pregnant with me. There was inflation over 1,000%.
Wow.
So they couldn't save any money. Mm-hmm. And like literally the day that was announced, they up and left. My dad first, mm-hmm. and then my mom a few days later, worried my dad wouldn't get out if he didn't leave on the day it was announced. So that's literally how they ended up in the States and left everything behind.
Paolo's story begins with his parents' decision to leave Argentina during a time of political instability and hyperinflation of over 1,000%. His father, a highly skilled accountant, faced the challenge of rebuilding a career in the United States while providing for a growing family. Watching his father navigate these obstacles instilled in Paolo an appreciation for hard work, frugality, and resilience. These lessons became the foundation of Paolo's own entrepreneurial drive.
My dad is super smart, you know, top of his class in Universidad de Buenos Aires, which he went there. He got his master's. It was back in the 80s. Nobody cared in the States about his education. He came here. My mom was expecting. They showed up at my grandparents' house, basically like, hey, we don't have a job. We don't have any money. Mm-hmm. He started looking for a job all around the country. And the only place that would hire him was a Argentinian bank. Okay. Which was in San Francisco. So that's why I was born in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I was hired ground floor, doing a job way beneath him in terms of ability. Right. He just worked his way up. Mm-hmm. At the same time, when I was a little kid, he was basically working a full day, coming home to have dinner with us, then going back to Berkeley to go to night classes so that he could show an American education and use that to leverage into another position, right? So that he could show, hey, I got a Berkeley education, not just Argentinian education. Mm-hmm. One super hardworking, charismatic person, atypical for an accountant, for sure, personal hero of mine. Looking back, he's super resourceful. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a ton of money growing up. Over time, he became successful. He made me feel like we could never afford anything. Yeah. He still saves plastic bags. It's like he wears his shoes for years, repurposes his shoes into work shoes. Like nothing gets thrown away. No money spent. The value of money was taught to me really early. I saw the sacrifice he made in doing all the things he was doing.
Growing up on a small vineyard and farm in rural Patagonia, Argentina, Paolo's father developed a deep passion for winemaking early on. In a community where opportunities were scarce and most people stayed close to home, he stood out as one of the few who dared to leave for Buenos Aires in pursuit of something greater. Despite moving away, his love for winemaking never wavered. Paolo recalls what it was like whenever his father would return to Patagonia for a visit.
When he goes back and his friends are still there, they're like, whoa, you've seen the world, all these places. Yeah. So I think what he wanted to do, had he been given the choice, he probably would have made wine. Mm-hmm. But I think it wasn't lost on me that he had kids, didn't have money, he wanted to provide. The choices that he made from that point on were all about providing a life for me
Right.
and for my sister,
Right.
as opposed to being selfish and doing what he wants to do.
Right.
Despite his talent for accounting, his true passion was in winemaking, a dream he set aside to provide for his family. His father prioritized creating a stable life for his children, often sacrificing personal ambitions. From humble beginnings to a promotion that landed his father in New York and Paolo and the family in Connecticut, Paolo's father was determined and selfless.
He personified the American dream, starting from the bottom, working his way up gradually. You know, at one point, he started doing really well. His personality allowed him to do that because he started speaking up in rooms as he became more senior. They realized this guy's, one, he's really smart. Two, he speaks 6 languages. And,
6? Wow.
Yeah, and so he got involved in a Latin American private equity group, a TCW. And then once they realized that everyone likes my dad, they start bringing him down for deals. He became the deal guy. Nobody wanted to talk to anybody but my dad. He understood the culture. He understood the language. And that's where things changed for him in terms of his leverage.
And necessity is the mother of invention, right? Why some individuals become great at communicating and deal making, because they have that empathy for others.
Paolo went on to share that growing up, he learned a lot from his father's deeply risk-averse mindset and unwavering work ethic. His dad always cautioned him against taking big risks, whether it was leaving a stable job, starting his own business, or even going back to school full-time. Those warnings often felt limiting, but they came from a place of wanting to protect Paolo. At the same time, his father's example instilled in him the importance of showing up early, working hard, and constantly finding ways to add value, principles that helped him stand out and move ahead in his career.
All the risks that I took were crazy to him.
Yeah.
But I took a lot of lessons that he had. He was always like, you show up the earliest, add value, you do your task. When you're done with your task, you create something else, bring it to your boss. That's the sort of person that starts to get ahead and gets noticed. Right. It's not somebody who's like, hey, I did all my work, I'm leaving. It's like, what else can I do?
Right.
You have to be solution oriented to add value. So he taught me all that stuff, which was great. And that's how he got ahead.
However, there were gaps too. For example, without knowing any better, Paolo accepted his first job offer without negotiating his pay. This reflected his belief that hard work alone would earn recognition and later pay raises.
I didn't learn to negotiate an offer. They gave me the first offer. I said, I accept. My position was, I'll add enough value that you'll recognize it.
You get your foot in the door. I guess there's more than one way to do things, and that's the way he knew how to do it. You go back a little over 100 years, you had the Great Depression, and what that caused for a whole society is a different mentality, right? There was bread lines, there was all these kind of things. And so as I worked with the older generation, I was able to see that they did some of the things that you described your father doing. They were very mindful of every penny that was being spent. He just wanted the stability, right? Some of those values are really powerful even today.
I had a really close family, which provided me a strong foundation and values. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was selling baseball cards. I was selling candy. There was like a million hustles that I had prior to even going through high school. And my dad told me when I was leaving school, you don't have any idea what it is to be an employee. I wanted to start my own business right out of school. He said, you got to learn how to work for somebody first. That was sort of why I went the Wall Street path, because they really teach you, especially in New York, the hours, the expectations of work. And I had this mentality, 1,000 people want my job. I'm just happy to have one. I think that all really helped me from a work ethic standpoint.
As we unpack Paolo's journey, it's clear how generational values shaped his outlook. His father's focus on stability and cautious decision-making stood in contrast to Paolo's natural inclination towards risk-taking and entrepreneurship. This tension between security and ambition is a theme many of us can relate to, especially when building on the sacrifices of those who came before us.
But I always knew that I was going to go out on my own. I was just sort of listening to my dad, who I respected, and I, as much as I think wanted to be a great employee, there's aspects about me that made me not function so well within a a traditional hierarchy, I would often raise my voice and speak up where it didn't make sense. I had to learn time and place.
I'm curious about that because I see myself in that story. Was an employee early in life, share similar values with immigrant parents as a third generation. But for me, it was problem solving. When you come out of that household, you're also a problem solver,
Totally.
right? To this day, one of the things that I am so proud of is my head is always like efficiency, questioning things like, why is it done that way? We're smarter than that. We can do it different. I sense some of the same patterns. The fact that you said that you had some challenge, you were speaking out of place, I spoke out all the time because I saw it was being done wrong.
I played team sports my whole life, and I've always been about the team. If you see something that can benefit everyone, why would I not try to improve something that benefits everyone?
Right.
Whether or not it's my place to say something, it's just like seem like good ideas there should be a meritocracy of good ideas.
Yeah.
Which is something that I've definitely tried to build in my business. But like to your other point, I think like I call it scrappiness,
right?
Problem solving. I've always had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I think you can go too far with that where it can become a negative, but you have to have some level of a chip on your shoulder. You have to be scrappy because things are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
You can't just throw your hands up. You got to be constantly iterating on ideas. The first idea you have is never going to be the one that lasts. Like it's always going to be improved, and you've just got to listen to feedback and constantly be updating. And that's what sort of business is, right? Or in life too.
I'm curious, how long did you work for somebody else before you started your
I
own
was
path?
out of school. I went to UBS investment bank. This is 07. So it was about as interesting, like a place to go work because it was the top of the market before the great financial crisis. And I was learning about credit default swaps, mortgage-backed securities, interest rate swaps, basically what was largely blamed for the downfall of the market.
And if you don't know what that is, watch The Big Short. It explains everything.
Paolo's first step into the professional world was at UBS Investment Bank during the 2008 financial crisis. This trial by fire exposed him to the harsh realities of market volatility and the importance of adaptability. Later, at Guggenheim Partners, he witnessed the power of contrarian investing, deploying capital when others were risk-averse, a lesson that would influence his entrepreneurial and investment philosophy.
It was The Big Short. Like the UBS's trading floor, which was the biggest trading floor in the world at the time, was where they filmed The Big Short, about credit default swaps, about all other stuff. So I saw the market rapidly decline, people losing their jobs left and right. It was like going to work and you see a group of people on their phones and you're like, there goes another division. I was 21 years old, so I didn't have any money anyways. I hadn't worked very long and there was really not a lot for me to lose at this point. But now it hits much deeper, having a family, having all these other things, like having a house. I think I didn't fully appreciate the stress that people were going through that I was working with. Because for me, it was like, well, I'll lose my job, I'll get another one. I'm just trying to learn.
Yeah.
And that was crazy. I think UBS wrote down like $40 billion. It was a good lesson in risk.
Yeah.
A lot of the assumptions that they walked in with were sort of their undoing in terms of counterparty risk and controls. Really. So,
and for the audience, I just want to clarify, when someone says they wrote down 40 billion, that means they wrote off. That means it just disappeared. We don't have it anymore. We lost $40 billion.
We had days where you pick up the phone and we were on the do not trade list because people thought we might be insolvent.
Right.
During the 2008 financial crisis, fear gripped the markets as major firms like Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers collapsed, creating widespread distrust. People questioned where to put their money and whether anything was safe. Many clients, overwhelmed by the instability, simply wanted to pull everything into cash, prioritizing security over anything else amidst the chaos.
It was an interesting job because I went into it with that mentality that my dad gave me. Showed up first, working super hard, trying to create ways to add value. But of course, there was like you're lucky to hold on to your job.
Right.
There was no upward mobility or opportunity really in that time period that I saw. And it became normal that you were talking to a recruiter to try to find another job. I actually, at the bottom of the market, landed at Guggenheim Partners, which is now massive. Was pretty big then. I think that there were a bunch of siloed businesses that connected over time, and now they have in the trillions. They had money when nobody else did.
Guggenheim Partners, during the financial crisis, quickly shifted to cash and started buying struggling loans at very low prices, which were called collateralized loan obligations, or CLOs. Over time, as those distressed loans regained their value, they made significant profits. This success helped their business grow rapidly, attracting wealthy individuals, large organizations, and retirement funds as clients. Their team dealing with these types of investments expanded fast, hiring new people almost every week. It was exciting for Paolo to see this growth early on in his career, especially during a financial crisis.
It was great to see that. That was a great experience for me, and seeing the other side of it.
What did that teach you? We're still working for somebody else at that point. So what things are you learning? Is there any lessons that you were able to bring forward?
Matt McDonald jumps in to compare Paolo's early career to their current real estate and venture capital company together called Stellify VC. The discussion highlights how market opportunities arise during times of instability, especially when others are risk-averse. In 2008 to 2009, firms like Guggenheim capitalized on discounted loans created by lack of planning and liquidity in the market, deploying cash when others were pulling back. This contrarian approach, taking calculated risks when the consensus was overly cautious, proved successful over time. These lessons are relevant today with similar dynamics unfolding in real estate and venture markets. Navigating complex decisions often requires balancing conservative instincts with a willingness to take bold, long-term bets, especially in areas with limited liquidity. Ultimately, it's about evaluating opportunities, trusting your experience, and having the courage to act when others hesitate, whether as an investor or an entrepreneur betting on yourself.
We're living that same story. You have this visceral experience, I think, when you learn how powerful the markets are, right? And it has nothing to do with how you behave or show up to work. In real estate, that's what's happened over the last 2 years. It's not necessarily that you made a bad decision. Maybe interest rates went up. Maybe you did make bad decisions, but macro issues independent of those choices and a lack of liquidity, the folks behaving in a contrarian fashion and deploying when everybody else is running, I think are now going to succeed in a way that I think it was also true at Guggenheim. I think we're sort of experiencing a similar thing now in the early stage venture market.
They had money from the Guggenheim family. They had cash to deploy, and they were risk on where other people were risk off, and they were rapidly deploying capital. I think the other interesting thing, which I learned when things like this happen, you can be very reactionary and people don't plan ahead in terms of structure in many ways. So a lot of the reason why a lot of these loans were available, there was a massive amount of redemptions on the market from larger institutional LPs, because in the fund docs for a lot of these CLO managers, there wasn't defined lockup periods. And so they came calling for their capital, and that's what created these discounts, which Guggenheim was able to take advantage of. Yeah. Right. So I remember there was this period where I was like, maybe I'll get another job. Maybe I'll stay in New York for a while, because I was liking living in New York. The question you were always asking is, what's your lockup period in your fund? Like, what's the risk of your capital going away in that period of time? It was interesting. You sort of learn from these periods. Sometimes you can overcorrect. The most important thing is to be forward looking and not follow the consensus. If the consensus is all saying one thing, it's like short-term opportunities probably going to be there. Liquidity is probably going to be there. But if you're investing for the long run, you want to go where the value is. Yeah. And the value is where the lack of liquidity is, like where the liquidity's left the market, and you have to be able to be comfortable taking a stance, being in a place where people think you're a little crazy. That's what we're doing now.
The name of this show, Matt, that you came up with is Navigating Complexity. Because life isn't easy. It's not a straight line. Here's a situation, and I've always got a choice to do this or this. I could be wrong, but you got to go with your gut. This feels gut and experience. This feels right. Let's do this. This sounds like some of that learnings from your father and being super conservative, but also you're yourself are a natural risk taker. And then you see this within companies. These guys had cash and they were deploying it. They were taking risk on during a time when everybody else was doing quite the opposite. And over time, you saw that was the right call, but it took some time. So it sounds like you're applying some of that knowledge and history has shown us, and we're looking at the situation instead of like, I'm risk off. It's actually a good opportunity right now because all of these things have happened. Now has moved from whatever market it was before. Now it's moved to the real estate market. There's opportunity because of X, Y, or Z you to take advantage of. It sounds like that's what I'm hearing.
It's a winding road, and you got to continually evaluate if you're doing the right thing. Being in derivatives, leverage debt, and trading, sort of realize I want more control over like the destiny of the things that I do and invest in.
Right.
And of course, being an entrepreneur is like the ultimate place where you're betting on yourself. Real estate made a lot of sense to me in that sense because you could buy an asset that it's physical, you can look at. It's not a derivative. You have some ability to work on the asset itself, like the business. So that's why I came out of it wanting something more tangible.
How long were you working for someone else before you started wanting to go?
Almost 5 years.
5 years. Well, then you're like, I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah.
What was your first venture?
When I left Guggenheim, I wanted to start a vineyard with my dad. I had grown up making wine with my dad, and we would make grappa and we'd make wine every year and cognac. And so I wanted to do that. I had this vision of doing it in Argentina and me running the business, sort of paying back my dad.
Yeah.
So he could do that and be the vinter. I do the business running. I had done a lot of research while at Guggenheim to set myself up for that, which was a good lesson. And one, trying to do things from afar. Also should have known better because a lot of the things that were presented to me, things that were advertised as a working farm were far from working farms. My budget was completely off from what I thought it was. Had to completely reevaluate. What I learned from that short experience, and I actually pulled out before doing it, was it was much more of a passion project than a sound business idea. I realized what was driving it was me wanting to like work with my dad.
The
me
business
wanting
model.
to like, create something that was actually going to make money.
Right.
And
it's a big distinction to make early on. Like you were at that point, you were 25, 26?
Probably 26, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I pulled out of that and I was looking at doing a distillery in Wynwood, Miami. I had spent some time in Miami and Wynwood was been a great idea.
I
But
was going to say you got the
it
timing
was
right.
just a bunch of warehouses and some graffiti. And I was like, man, this would be a cool place. Didn't do it. But I moved to Miami with the intention of doing that or going to business school. And I got a liberal arts education. So I think that was a sort of big thing that was missing was I didn't have a real foundation for business or finance. Everything I learned was on the job. I realized that I wanted a partner. So I was like, maybe if I go someplace, like business school, super entrepreneurial, I'll find somebody who has a similar mindset to me, and we could start a business together.
Right.
Taking the leap into entrepreneurship, Paolo initially explored starting a vineyard in Argentina with his father. While the project was deeply meaningful, it ultimately lacked the financial viability Paolo was seeking. This realization led him to pivot toward multifamily real estate, where he co-founded a vertically integrated business, tackling everything from property management to construction. Starting a business while attending business school, Paolo exemplified the hustle and scrappiness it takes to succeed as a founder.
What ended up happening was one of my good friends, now business partner, we've just become really good friends in New York and just run around the city together. He was really hardworking. That's Nick. And was originally in brokerage and then went to real estate private equity company, was running constructions and acquisition down the whole East Coast. He was like, I'm going to go out on my own. I had been interested in real estate. So I was like, let's do that. I had already applied to business school. I decided to apply sort of strategically to places where I thought markets could grow and that had like an entrepreneurial feel. I'd never been to Texas before. Went down to Texas for first a bachelor party. It was back in 2013. And the second I got there, I was like, this is where I'm going. Spent some time at UT and was on a rainy street and it was like, this feels very special. Like the vibe here, you could see cranes in the sky and it just felt like, okay, this is going to blow up. So I made the decision to start the business in multifamily literally as soon as I moved to Texas. Austin. The day when I started business school, I also started the business. The important part about starting a business is you have to convince yourself and everyone around you that you're legitimate when even though you're not. When you start out, we were just two guys with no backing. Thought we were pretty smart. We had a decent background to sort of do this, but we didn't really have a business. We spent a lot of time meeting with people as though we were this like established business.
Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it, 100%.
I picked up on something you said I want to touch on. You started business school and a business at the same time, and it's hard enough to start one for the other. But I see two sides of that coin. It's like one, two different things that you've got to be doing, which kind of relate to each other, but it's still time-wise an obligation, right?
Yeah, it was a full-time program. I literally was never not working. And I took my classes, undergrad. I never really loved school. It's just tough to get me to focus on something that I'm not passionate about. But when I am passionate about something, I really dig in.
Well, that was the other side of the coin. It's tough time-wise, but your learning gets accelerated because you're applying it immediately.
Yeah, I was taking classes related to my business. It was just Nick, myself, and Will, the other partner. We didn't have an accountant, so I was like, I guess I'll learn accounting. I took a bunch of accounting classes and was learning that side of the business, trying to, I found mentors through my classes that helped me, that were real estate guys in town that connected me to that space and grew the network. But one of the most impactful things, which I didn't realize till later, was we were hustling to put deals together. Because of the fact that we didn't have a lot of money, it led us to sort of scatter site multifamily. So less than 100 units where you don't have economies of scale and, institutional groups.
Is that what that means? I'm not familiar with the term.
Yeah. Scatter site is basically small mom and pop buildings. Right. And there's a lot of value because you deal with a lot of mom and pops that are utilizing, sort of mom and pop property management companies, mom and pop construction companies, because all the legitimate property management companies, construction companies want economies of scale, right? So as soon as they grow out, they're out. What happens is a lot of these guys that have a business, maybe want to own an investment property. They live in California, they live somewhere else, and they're not at their building every day or every week or even seeing it, right? So they just hire some group, and the group, because they care about, making profit, they can't spend a lot of time at the building either. So it becomes mismanaged. And it was like low-hanging fruit that we were able to
bring efficiencies to things that weren't efficient.
And sold that. We basically turned it into a more marketable sell. We said, well, we're bringing efficiency. We vertically integrated, which basically meant me, Nick, and Will collecting rent, doing everything ourselves, which is sort of the scrappiness that we were a construction company, a property management company, just the three of us doing everything. GCing, collecting rent, banging on doors. We were very involved in getting hit up all day by tenants. I would not do that again.
Something comes to mind as you're speaking about all this. It's like you jump right into all these things and partners. There's a lot of fear for people to make that leap. Was there fear for you going from working at a full-time job to I'm going to do these things? Or were you like, I've been dying to get out and do things myself? What did that look like?
I want to be honest, I had no fear.
Really?
Yeah. I think the fear settled in later.
That's what I was going to say. Like when you make that leap, you don't know enough to be afraid, and you learn what you should have been afraid of later on.
Oh, that tiger back
thank
there.
God I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. It's like, what did I get myself into? That's where the scrappiness and sort of like like failure is not an option, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah, yeah.
What you sort of, you're like, all right, I'm going to figure this out no matter what it takes. I think looking back, when I tell the story of how we grew out the multifamily part of our business, it resulted in me wanting to ram my head through the wall. There was a point in time where I was like, why did I do this? And then why did I do this in this way?
There's something there that I want to pull the thread on a little bit to something you said earlier. And I think there's a lot of, in entrepreneurism and in making it and being an entrepreneur, there has got to be that belief of self above all else. You said that earlier. Whenever you have someone come in to your VC, they're looking to fund a business. The first thing you're looking for is that person scrappy? Is that person resourceful? Are they not going to stop, right? Because you have to have that belief of self. And looking back now, you're like, I had that, and I was not going to fail. I was going to keep going until you don't fail.
I think it's interesting because there's a balance. We have a different way of looking at what qualities make a good founder. Traditional VCs understand you're building a big idea, you're going to need a lot of money. And so the prioritization around the ability to sell a vision and to raise money often gets put way ahead of the ability to execute on that vision.
Drawing from his entrepreneurial experience, Paolo shares key insights into what makes a successful founder. It's not just about the vision, it's about execution. He highlights the importance of being resourceful and resilient, qualities that often outweigh charisma in the long run. As an investor now, Paolo prioritizes founders who can tackle immediate challenges while maintaining a clear long-term strategy.
We like the guys who are a little bit more rough around the edges in terms of that sale point, but are really operators, because at the end of the day,
that's the daily grind.
That's what gives you the optionality as you grow. Right. That's what allows you to be successful, to generate revenue, to think about things the right way, and to tackle all those problems. Like the big vision, sometimes what I've seen is the best fundraisers are often some of the worst executors, right? Because they're very comfortable in pitching a vision that is nowhere near monetization, or maybe not even going to happen in the next 5 years. Right. They're like, we're going to be the next Apple. Someone hearing that, who is a high level person is like, wow, that's great. I want to invest in the next Apple. But how do you get there? It's weird. I've been attracted to smaller visions, narrowly focused on here's how I'm going to achieve this. Then I can understand, well, when they achieve this, I can actually see way beyond that. Right. I like when people can get granular into how do they get to this point A.
And then give themselves a bunch of new options. Capital finds good deals, right? If you have a good business, you can attract capital, but you also have the luxury to pick a strategy, right?
So don't sell the 20-year vision, sell the 5-year vision.
Well, you kind of have to sell both.
You got to sell both. That's where the balance is. Like I found over time, realizing the benefit, of course, you have somebody who can inspire is really important, but you definitely need that. You need to also find that person who is scrappy. The mentality that we went into venture capital with is now very in vogue. And it's not like we were trying to be forward thinking in that way. It's just, it was our experience. We bootstrapped a bunch of businesses and never took outside capital, which looking back would have loved to take outside capital. But it's also, you've got to make sure you're taking, for something like us, for Old 300 or for the other businesses we built, you got to take the right capital. You want the right partners. You learn that experience. There's definitely a paying your dues that go into a fun one.
I am so intrigued on the business side of it and how you went from this point to this next point, and then all the lessons that investors and business owners and founders should know from a VC. We want to jump into that in our next episode.
Paolo's journey is a powerful reminder of how our past shapes us, but doesn't define us. From his family's sacrifices to his own entrepreneurial risks, he's learned to navigate complexity with resilience and adaptability. For anyone out there chasing big dreams, remember, success is not built just on vision, but on the scrappiness to bring it to life. Join us on our next episode as we welcome Paolo back to share the invaluable lessons he's learned as a venture capitalist and real estate developer, and to discover the exciting ventures he's funding today. Thanks for tuning in to Navigating Complexity. Life, business, and success are rarely straightforward. They're a winding road of challenges and opportunities. But with perseverance and a willingness to embrace the unknown, we can all find our way forward. Until next time, keep navigating, keep learning, and keep striving for your best, no matter how complex life is.